you tell us what you just played?
Walk Along the Wapsie. That's a tune I made up. Anti-war. It's anti-killing people, basically. To me, it has a lot to do with the nature of mortality and our inability to really appreciate mortality and what it means, and to impose it on another person without even understanding what it means to ourselves. It's mortality, our own death, tends to be something that a lot of people fear. They want to avoid it. Naturally so, I think. But to impose it on someone else, especially as a policy, it's to me, it's an affront. It's an affront against the deity, if I may, that we would presume to kill someone when we ourselves don't want to die. In a self-defense situation, it's different. But in warfare, it's pretty much predetermined, premeditated. And I think that's basically the basic reason that I am anti-war and pro-peace. I just would like to see people have the opportunity to live and be creative and have a full life and not be murdered. I think that voice is very important to society. My own reasoning of it is that the youth, I believe, are better able to see the social ideals that society reveres and that puts at the top of its value system with words, but not necessarily with actions. And I think that the youth are better able to see our society's hypocrisy, where we say we have one system of values, but we behave in a different way. I think the youth are looking for integrity. They're looking for a value system that really holds together, and that they don't have to cut out all kinds of exceptions for. So if society is saying that we have a value system of valuing life, and then they see our behavior, our national behavior, apparently not valuing life, I think the youth, the younger generation, is better able to see that, and it's really more important to them that there be an integrity between our values and what we say about them. Because of the future, we've got other problems. You know, when I was a kid, I thought, well, first we'll solve the war problem, and then that'll help us, that'll give us what we need to solve other problems. But right now, we haven't solved the war problem, and we haven't solved the other problems too. But things like the climate disaster, I get tired of the term climate change. They started saying climate change because they didn't want to say global warming. But it's beyond that. It's a climate disaster. And basically, anybody looking at it is going to recognize that fact. And we really need to get busy on these things, but instead we're bickering, we're fighting, we're killing, we're spending our treasure on more weapons. So we're not getting the work we need to do done. In both cases, you had the utter destruction of civilian societies that were happening in Vietnam, with the bombing, the napalm being dropped on really humble villages with thatched roof houses and so on. And the murder and the mayhem was very poignant to the anti-war movement. But beyond that, there was also the fear of the draft, and the young people that were looking at the very high likelihood that they would end up in Vietnam committing some of the atrocities and suffering the injuries as well. Today we don't have so much the draft side of things, although I heard they've just improved their registry system for the draft in case they do decide to draft people. But I think that the genocide that the younger generation, everybody's been observing, is so visceral and so obvious that this is the moral issue of it is really carrying the movement at this point. It's not a fear of being personally involved as a soldier through the draft. It's actually the moral, the crime that's being committed and a direct moral response to that crime. That's how I would look at the difference between now and then. Then we also had the fear of being drafted. Today, not so much. Well, the similarities are just the brutality of the military operations. In Vietnam, we had the picture of people running while they were on fire from napalm. Today we have the views of women and children crushed between sandwiching floors of apartment buildings that have been bombed and so on. People care about different things and they worry about different things. There's this really strong self-interest in I've got to deal with my moment and my time, the here and now, and not be concerned about what's going on the other side of the world. It depends on how closely how much you believe, like what goes around comes around, say. Take that way of saying it, that if something becomes everyday, we're going to see it ourselves. Like, for instance, right now, genocide is pretty much being accepted by our policy, the policy determining parts of our government are basically letting it happen. And so the principle that it cannot be allowed to happen, that principle has been turned into a lie. And so you've got a deterioration of an ethical basis of your assumption set, what you believe you can assume to be true regarding morality and ethics. It's really decaying right in front of us. And some people, I'll put myself among them, are sort of look at system level issues. And from a system level, if you have a deterioration of your ethical and your moral value system, that's going to lead to a deterioration throughout society. And so it's dangerous. It's dangerous. It's not only criminal, a criminal attack on the people who are being killed and victimized, but it's also dangerous to us all, because it's like any number of philosophers say, where one man is imprisoned, no man is free. That's sort of an attitude. Where there's injustice anywhere, there's not justice anywhere. It's like we share in the whole of justice and injustice. We share in the whole of whether murder is right or wrong. And likewise, especially to commit murder for profit, which, to me appears to be what's going on. We'll take over the territory. I think becoming as real as possible in our understanding of the cost of it and the damage that it's doing to it. To become clear about that, make our arguments, find our ways of expressing that, and share our actual honest understanding of why these are problems. I mean, if you ask yourself, why do I think this is a problem? It may not be easy to articulate why you think it's a problem, but deep down you do understand why you think it's a problem. So looking for those roots of your own concern on these issues is one way to get there. I grew up in a family where killing people was wrong, and mass killing was definitely wrong, and warfare was considered tragic, a tragic misunderstanding or a tragic mistake. And I think working from that basis, if you can get to that basis where you just see it as wrong, as a mistake, as a failure to go a better direction, that those are clear in the instances you mentioned, Vietnam, the Gulf War, and today. Those are all clear if you look at it, but the broad masses aren't really going to look at it. This is where the media has an opportunity to help or to not help. And recently I'm noticing there's more coverage now of Gaza on our national public radio, but for a long time almost nothing significant. And these decisions of whether to cover something or not are made by somebody, and I would like people to be more aware that their value system, whatever it is, that's the value system they get to live with. And down the road, they get to review their life and to think where they were and what were they doing when. And back to the not nice side of activism, I think we were too nice after the Vietnam War. And after it was over, we didn't really rub anybody's nose in it, and we really should have. We should have found the militarists, and we should have condemned them. With the Gulf War, what George W. Bush did in Iraq, just totally criminal. First, they had nothing to do with 9/11, so to frame them as having had to do with 9/11, and then just destroying their country. That's criminal behavior, but none of them have been taken to task except to be criticized, by the pundits. But these are criminal acts. My view would be you'd take some of your war criminals and actually put them in prison. That would be one thing you could do. But we need to, like in the biblical phrase, you want to be as gentle as a dove, but you want to be as wise as a serpent. You can't have the mix. You can't cross those and be just soft-hearted and soft-headed at the same time. If you want to have a soft heart, you need to have a hard mind that can look at reality and evaluate it for what it is really, and then do your tactic and your strategy based on reality, not on just a good feeling of what would be nice. Anyway, I think that the peace movement toughening up and facing the fact that our world is going to hell right now. Our climate is going to hell. Our budgets are way out of kilter. And it's the leadership that's dragging us that way. We need to say stop, and we need to be serious about it. One thing I'll say, if things are going to break, to use your term, when they break, we need to be already clear about what we want. We need to not be fumbling around. When strike when the iron is hot. That's true. You need a certain amount of energy in a situation before you can do anything with it. But you don't want to suddenly have all of that energy and all of that potential and not know what you want to do with it. So I encourage people to carry two views with them all the time. One view is the world as it is. Be very cold, be very clear-eyed to look at the world as it is, and don't fool yourself about the world as it is. But the second thing is to keep very clear what you want the world to be, what you dream the world should be. It's taking those two disparate images and finding how they can work together and where we can cross from the bad way to a better way. and recognizing them when there's the energy there to do it. I think that that's crucial for moving forward into a world that we do want. I think there are maybe two things going on in a protest, if you want to look at it broadly. There's an attempt to influence the opinion of society, but beyond that, there's also the effort to shore up the ones that are protesting, and the morale of the protesters is also important. And I think by showing up physically, we improve the morale of each other. We are social animals, and we draw a lot of affirmation from the people around us. And so in a group march or a group demonstration or an encampment, it's an opportunity not just to show the world what our opinion is, but to show each other our commitment to it. We've been indoctrinated to believe that we have a democracy, and theoretically we do, but it requires that consumers, I remember when people used to be citizens, now they're consumers, but it's a consumer's a relationship to a corporate world. But we don't take our responsibility as citizens in earnest. We have to, those of us who do take it seriously need to activate, encourage people to take it seriously. It used to be that the League of Women Voters managed the presidential debates, and as a result, you had candidates from third parties, and they weren't going to win, we knew that, but you got to hear their ideas. You got to hear them tackle the issues. Now, almost very few politicians that I hear actually are tackling issues. They're talking about personalities, they're talking about parties, about winning and losing, and they're not actually discussing the issues. And I suspect that's going to be true of the upcoming presidential debates. But if we look at the fact that we have two of the least liked politicians in our recent history are standing against each other, they're running against each other again, just like they did before, and there's nothing better. Our system doesn't have any way to bring a better fare before us. We need to really be looking at the system level changes that we can make. And I think, for instance, ranked choice voting might be one of these system level changes that we could do to bring the minority candidates at least into the conversation. That's the problem, in my view, is that we're not talking about our issues. We're talking about the political personalities and the political parties as such. And we should be talking about the issues of war and peace and the climate disaster and so on. It's kind of a well-known truism that we don't know what we have until it's gone. We don't know the danger we are in until we are close to it. That's a major issue that civil rights activists, that any kind of a social activist, I should say a social activist, is looking at. There's a tendency for a social activist to have themselves a clear vision of concern, a reason why they're concerned. And passing that on to other people is really a problem sometimes. And I think that's what the arts are good at, the humanities, good novelist, good graphic artist that can show us the reality of situations without we having to be in the middle of those situations. But sometimes we don't know that the knife is sharp until we feel its edge. It's like that with history too. I think that we don't recognize the danger of a collapsing situation until it has collapsed. And that's true much more for, again, I'll refer to the broad center of the distribution than for people who are really living on the edge. They might have some insight that the standard center of the population doesn't have. Just to say an interesting little situation with nuclear weapons at the moment, we know Israel has nuclear weapons. And that's really probably the reason that various Arab countries or Iran have not come directly to the aid of the Palestinians because of the fear of retribution, nuclear retribution. And it's also the reason that Iran is right now working hand over fist to get that nuclear weapon ASAP. So the nuclear weapons, they're in the realm of weapons more generally. The weapon and the military attitude of I will kill my enemy and then I won't have to worry about them is, I think that's a really natural part of what it means to be a primate, probably a vertebrate. I don't know at what level. It's very deep in our animal that we understand if we kill our enemy, then we've solved the problem. And we just do that at an instinctive level. I was a little kid, and discover some new principle, and I was just like, I wonder how I could turn this into a weapon. It's very instinctive, very natural to us to look for weapons, and the nuclear weapon is just sort of the culmination of that. But now we're in a situation where if we break them out and actually employ them, then it's mutually assured destruction for everyone. So we've kind of reached the end of that rope where we can develop bigger and better weapons and they'll solve some kind of a problem for us. And in my view, the human civilization has reached the place where it needs to intellectually come to terms with the dilemma that it is faced with. And disarmament definitely has to be part of that picture. After World War II, there was a lot of interest in disarmament and a lot of talk about disarmament, but we see where that has gone. They reduced the numbers of nuclear weapons, but you always think, well, they're really just upgrading them, building more modern ones and so on. But the idea of actually taking them apart and disarming, I think we may be farther away from that than we were. After World War II and all of this horrible destruction had been suffered, then that's one of those awake moments where people are sensitive to the problem. That's a really tough order to come up with, leaders that will make change. The money, say in our civilization, actually in a lot of civilizations, in a lot of history, you'll find that money is the determinant. Who has the money? Who has the power? And we'll find that there's a positive feedback loop on power and money. Those that have it tend to want more of it, and they also tend to be in a position to accomplish that. And so there's a natural tendency in human society, I think, for it to, I say, bifurcate, but to turn into levels. There is a tendency for the rich to get richer and the poor to get poorer. Right now, there is so much investment in military industry that we have the largest military budget in the world ever by the United States right now, and it equals the total expenditure of the next 6 or 8 countries combined. So there's this huge financial investment in military production. So how to find a leader in a democratic society that will turn their back on money and pick up ideas for the power that might be in an idea compared to the power that might be in money. So tell me which ideas have more power than money right now. When after a disaster, after everybody's hurting, yeah, people then can start to think about life could be better if we did it a different way. But right now, life is pretty good for a lot of people, and it's very good for rich people right now, and for the people who are invested in military industries right now, they're doing pretty good. So how you make a political movement to seize on ideas that are strong enough to oppose the power of money, that's really the situation we're in right now, as I see it. Well, one way is when you have a defeat and a disappointment, look at it instead as an education. Like you learn something about, say, about the system. The system told you you could do this or that, and be civically engaged and do good things, and you try it, and you realize that the system has really been set up to ignore that sort of activism, and you really are not reaching the nerve. You're not finding the argument that people need to listen to and need to answer. They'll put you in a free speech zone somewhere and watch you do it, and maybe even applaud you for doing it, but they're not going to change what they're doing. At this point, I think money is a main thing. I think that the boycotts are important. I saw Intel just has stopped building a $20 billion factory in Israel. And I think the boycott, it worked against South Africa. It worked on the grape issue, the grape harvesters. When I was a kid, there was a grape boycott, lettuce boycott. They do work, and it's one way to reach the grassroots of society with something they can do. They can just not support the beast, as it were, and that's one way to be effective. And in terms of morale of the movement, victories are really important. You need to have victories, and if we're beating our head against the wall and nothing is working, then we need to try other approaches. Basically, there's a huge field between doing nothing and being violent. Between the one and the other, there's this huge field for creativity, and so don't stop thinking about it. Keep working on it. Look for victories where you can, celebrate victories where you get them. Let your people and your movement know that you're there for them, and be creative, have fun, don't give up. Keep on keeping on. That was a phrase that came out of the civil rights movement. Keep on keeping on. Another phrase I think was important was to comfort the afflicted and afflict the comfortable. And to afflict the comfortable, you don't have to be violent. There's a thousand ways to bring attention to things that need to be attended to in front of the comfortable without engaging in violence. There's a lot of creative things can be done. I just driving back from Kansas City the other day and seeing the railroad passing over the interstate, and I'm thinking, now that'd be a good place for a sign, just say Gaza or something. Just give people something to think about. But there are lots and lots of things that haven't been tried yet, so I would encourage young people and anyone to get out there and try them. The war it's an existential threat. Definitely, it is. It's when it's a threat to the ones that you're making war on, it's actually a threat to the ones making the war. If they lose their democracy over a war, if they become a security state, a national security state because of their war, it's a threat to everybody. So right now, doing away with war is a threat to the people who earn their livelihood working in the war industries. So back in the 70s, there was an effort toward conversion, to convert the war industries into civilian production of some sort. I think that's an important thing to do. We have a country right now very, very weak. A lot of our infrastructure is weak. It could definitely be improved. It would be a good project, in my view, to move the money that we're spending on warfare, move it into civilian infrastructure. And I think that would solve part of the economic conflicts that we have too, to have just better infrastructure to support the whole of the society. The fascist tendency, which I've come to believe pretty much inhabits about 30% or so of us. It's much closer than I had imagined growing up. But that idea that if we all get together, we can make people be what we want them to be, or act how we want them to act, or we can gang up on the people we don't like and punish them. That is the main fear that I have, that the society develops a fascist urge to punish the weak, to attack the underdog, and that sort of thing. Hard to come up with a solution there, partly because you don't really know how people think. A lot of people are actually just trying to conform, and they will conform either toward a liberal program or toward a conservative program. They'll conform toward a fascist program. If they're compelled most of all to conform, they're going to look around and see what people are doing, and they're going to do it too. And so just because someone is uttering liberal words, you don't really know why they're doing that, and what their real commitment is, what their real faith is with regard to principles and principled behavior. I'm going to come back to the arts and the humanities with this. I think that we have a tendency to shoehorn all of our excitement, say, into politics, and we think of it as an athletic contest of some sort, that we'll cheer for our team, and then at the end of the game we've either won or lost. And I would rather see going into the booth on election day as sort of just another thing that you do. It's on the schedule and you do it, but it is not the meat and potatoes, if you'll forgive my carnivorous metaphor here. It's not the main thing of what makes society humane. And what makes a society humane is your everyday life. And the arts as a way of encoding a value system or a point of view into something that we frame, and we say, here, look at this. Write a play, say, here, think about the themes here we're discussing. Those kinds of activities build the mass of culture that the winds of money blowing around can kind of dance on the top of, if it will. But we don't want that money moving around to be the main foundation of the culture. We want to have a value system that's not just a number that can be more or less. We want to have a rich value system that includes caring for our family, friends, and our neighbors, caring that our work be meaningful, not just today, but in the long term, and so on. And it's only culture that can give you that polydimensional foundation, rather than just a number up or down the bottom line, making a decision on it. Is the number going to be greater or lesser? We make our decision more on how will it affect my family, how will it affect my kids, my grandkids, their grandkids. Like, are we thinking forward 7 generations, say, as some cultures would have us do? It's different than evaluating things based on what's going to happen, who's going to win this game, what's the score going to be on this game. We need a deeper basis, and I think it's culture and the humanities that do that for us. Maybe looking at the tactics of folk culture, humor is one of them, ridicule is one of them, ostracism is there, and these are not necessarily nice tactics, but they're also not violent. They don't have to be violent. And I think that if we're being led by fools and idiots, then it needs to be pointed out. And culture can do that, can make fun of people. And it's an important part, like the emperor's new clothes, that whole idea that artifice and posturing, they get worn as though they're authentic. And when people are posturing, they need to be poked. They need somebody to say, you're just full of hot air. You're just, there's nothing there. And so I think culture can do that, make fun of the things that need to be ridiculed is one tactic. Not to be afraid. We're taught to be nicey, and I think that we need to not be afraid not to be nice all the time. Not gorilla like the animal, but guerrilla like the fighter. But as theater, where I'm thinking of times where a theater troupe, one in particular, this was in the 1980s, they were opposed to the arms race. So they had a big van, and they had a missile mounted on the top of it. And they had a whole routine, plays and things they said, and they would pull up where there were a lot of people around and just start putting on a show. And suddenly they're the most interesting thing around, and everybody's paying attention to them. And it's a wonderful way to get a captive audience, really. You go in and you start doing something entertaining, all the kids are going to watch you. Everybody's going to watch you, and it's an opportunity to say something. It takes a certain amount of boldness to do it, but it can be done, and I've seen it be done, and it can be very effective. This is, I have been manufacturing these silk screening Gaza on them. I know it's funny with there are other genocides going on right now, and I was focused on Gaza because of our own country's complicity in it. But anyway, yes, I've been silk screening these up and distributing them far and wide. If you would like an armband, let me know.
Is there anything else you want to say before we wrap up the political discussion?
No, I think I've tried to say it.